Medicare's annual open enrollment period is underway and lasts through December 7th. So today we answer 10 commonly asked questions so that you'll get the coverage you need when you need it using the Medicare option that best matches you and your preferences. Getting this wrong can result not only in coverage that's a bad fit, but also possibly gaps in coverage or lifelong penalties for messing up the timing of your enrollment. Plus, toward the end, we explain a little-known version of Medicare that is now spread to 34 states and the District of Columbia that could save you tens of thousands of dollars in healthcare costs during your retirement. Stay tuned as we explore all this and more right now on the Retirement Lifestyle Show.
Welcome to the Retirement Lifestyle Show. I'm your co-host, Roshan Loungani, here as always with Erik Olson and Adrian Nicholson. We've got a great episode for you today. Gentlemen, how are you doing? Excited for the topic?
Very much so. Adrian?
Yep, I'm very excited. I know our listeners are going to find this very informative, so I'm ready to dive into it.
Great. So let me just launch right into this because we're in Medicare open enrollment period, and this lasts through December 7th. And so we thought it's time, if you haven't really been paying attention and you're approaching that point in your life where you're going to be eligible for this program, we want you to not mess up. So we're going to be talking about not only the broad framework of Medicare and some of the two most widely known pieces of that, the original Medicare and Medicare Advantage, but also a third little known one. We're going to save that sort of nugget for later in the episode. And we're also going to spend some time detailing some common questions that people ask about and can easily get confused and can trip people up on when they assume certain things are true or not true about Medicare. We don't want you tripped up by those sorts of things. We want to help you, get it right so that you don't wind up for the rest of your life paying more than you need or getting stuck without coverage or things of this kind. So why don't we dive into it? Adrian, you're going to lead us through some of these key questions, right, that people are asking about Medicare.
Yeah, of course, and it makes sense why people are asking these common questions because the Medicare system can be confusing and complex sometimes. So these kind of common questions, these 10 questions, will really kind of help shed some light and give you some quick facts on some information about this so you can help with the decision-making process. So question number 1 is a pretty basic one, and it's the most common one when it comes up. When should you sign up for Medicare? And you are eligible to sign up for Medicare beginning at age 65. But then there's the other end. Whether you should sign up for Medicare at age 65 really depends on if you have insurance or what kind of insurance you're working with right now. So this is kind of a good starting point. What do you guys think?
Well, just to be more specific on that time period, you've got the 3 months before and the 3 months after you turn 65 that you've got to enroll in that time period for Medicare.
Yeah, and we can talk about the different enrollment, the different parts of Medicare and into which you would enroll. So Part A, you're going to be automatically enrolled in that. If you turn 65 and you're collecting Social Security, that happens automatically. If on the other hand, if you're not collecting that Social Security, then that's not necessarily automatic. So you should go get registered. That part's free, but you should still go get registered. Then there's Part B. Guys, you want to talk about Part B?
Yep. Well, Part B, and actually one other thing on that Social Security, so many people now, their Social Security age is pushed back, right, as far as full retirement age goes. So the not being, receiving Social Security, therefore not automatically being enrolled, is becoming more the rule than the exception. But continuing on, Part A, which is free, will cover like hospitalization, right? Part B, which will cover things more like your regular doctor's visits, medical tests, that type of thing. That's not free, so you got to pay for that, and that's where if you are you don't have to. You can enroll, but then you can decline the Part B coverage if you have coverage elsewhere. If you're still working, for example.
Right. So yeah, that's actually, if you're still working and you turn 65, it's the thing to do is to talk with your medical plan provider and figure out how they interface or how they interact with Medicare. In some cases, for example, they'll say, hey, when you hit 65, nothing changes, you're all good. So at that point, you don't have to necessarily go enroll in Part B. But others of them will say, no, we trim back, and we're assuming that Medicare is going to carry the underlying load of your Medicare costs, and at 65, we're going to trim back and be more supplemental. So you need to know that, so that you're doing the right thing in terms of making sure you're getting those Part B premiums covered. Because the issue with not enrolling in a timely way in this is, especially if you delay beyond the point at which you should have enrolled, you can get dinged with a penalty that lasts for the rest of your life for late enrollment. And the reasoning behind that is that they're thinking, look, this whole social insurance thing only works if everybody's paying in. If you're trying to be a freeloader and get the benefit later without paying into it early on, then they're going to say, hey, that the system doesn't work that way. And so to disincentivize that behavior, and rather than having people sort of chance it to save a few bucks on their Part B premiums for a while, they want to get you engaged. Having said that, again, if your plan though takes that load, nevertheless, then you can continue and wait until you retire, and you can wait to enroll not when you're 65, but instead in a special enrollment period that's in the few months around your retirement.
And Erik, this penalty that you mentioned, does this increase over time? Is this just a one-time and done, or is this annual? I think that's like a big thing, because when people hear penalty, especially with, like we said, this complex system of Medicare, it's really important to figure this out.
Yeah. So my understanding is, Adrian, that it's not a one-time penalty. It's a fixed increase in ratio terms relative to what everybody else would be paying at the same income level for their Part B. Again, remember, Part A is free, so you've got Part B. If, let's say, most people are paying $148 or $49 right now a month for their Part B, but if, let's say, you get dinged with this penalty, depending on how many years you delayed it, that could scale up. And I think I've heard in some cases that it's twice as much. I don't quote me on that one,
No.
but it can be a meaningful shift in the amount that you're paying for Part B each year.
It's 10% above the premium for every 12-month period you didn't have coverage, and you could have.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you missed 2 12-month periods, so that's a 20% penalty. 3 12-month periods, 30%, and so on and so forth. And as Erik, as you said, it's a penalty for life, right? It doesn't go away.
Right.
That's major. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, do you guys want to mention anything else on this question of when you can sign up for Medicare, or are you ready to go on to
I'll just throw in this.
one?
If you are not going the route of original Medicare, but instead going Medicare Advantage, you have an extra enrollment period each year. So that's in the first quarter. But we're talking about this so far we've been addressing this as really just the basic question of first-time enrollees. But we just also want to highlight, when we're talking about open enrollment here now, this is, if you want to switch this, from now through December 7th, you're already a Medicare participant. This is a time when you can make some changes.
Which is exactly why we're doing this episode right now. It's you can and feel free to reach out and ask us any questions you have. We will touch on a topic I've gotten a couple questions on recently. If we don't, I'll bring it up
Okay.
at the end. But let's go on to the next one on the list.
The next one on the list, and this is a big one and a really personal one, is can I keep my same doctor? And in most cases you can, but I think this is like a perfect time, if you're listening to this episode, to have that conversation with your doctor. That if this is someone that you worked with a long time, this really good opportunity now for you to have that conversation with them if they do accept Medicare. And if it's a situation where they don't and you have to find a new one, then that's something that you really need to look into to see if that's something that they're going to accept. And I think this is a really popular question, and it's going to be really good. So what do you guys think about this one?
Well, I'll say in terms of the distinction between original Medicare and Medicare Advantage, what you just said is absolutely true about the original Medicare. You need to ask if your doctor covers it. If you take Medicare Advantage, aside from the sort of secret approach that almost no one knows about, that we'll be talking about later, is then you're actually going to be part of a network. And so unless your doctor is part of that network, it's sort of just it's a given that you'll have to switch to a different doctor.
Yeah, that is big, and just being put in a network or looking through different doctors within this can be a really big factor on which area that you go with. So what do you think about this, Roshan?
Yeah, I think this one's pretty much straightforward. Talk to your doctor, see if they're part of the plan, and that'll pretty much answer the question here.
Excellent. Yep. And we can move on to question number 3. What if I'm still working when I turn 65? Erik, what do you think about for this question? I know this is going to be a really popular one because everybody doesn't retire at the same time. Everybody works at different times. So I think this is another really common one that people would probably want you to shed some more light on.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. So I don't want to oversimplify or overcomplexify, I guess, but I would say is if you have a plan that meets the requirements that the Medicare administration has established for the quality of coverage, then you're permitted to stay in that employer plan. On the other hand, if it doesn't meet that requirement, then you need to at least get enrolled in A and B, and then possibly use the existing employer plan as a supplemental basis. But there are some other twists and turns. Roshan?
Yeah, that also pretty straightforward. Like you said, make sure your plan falls within the rules. You must enroll in those plans. And as we said earlier, A is free. And when I say enroll in those plans, I'm referring to Part A and Part B. But you can then decline Part B, so you don't have to pay for it if you're in a plan that allows you to do that without penalties.
Yeah.
Later.
There's another trick is if your company, let's say you work for a firm where the health plan covers fewer than 20 employees, that one you can't keep going with. You got to switch over to Medicare. And do you guys talk with your clients much about high deductible plans, health plans, and HSAs and such? Yeah, so as those have grown increasingly popular, you actually can't use those with Medicare. And so actually, if you're using them, it's a problem. So you have to figure out a way to if you're in one and haven't exited the high deductible version, don't enroll in Medicare yet. You need to kind of get yourself out of the high deductible version. That doesn't mean you have to cough up all the funds that are in your HSA that you've built over time, but it does mean you can't use that high deductible plan any longer. And then once you're out of that plan, then you can switch over, or go forward with the Medicare enrollment.
That's another solid point, Erik, and thanks for sharing that. Roshan, is there anything else you want to touch on this? But I pretty much think we hit all the major points on this.
No, I think we can move to question 4.
Question number 4 is, what about your spouse? I think this is another good one. If you're both still working and your spouse is covered under the plan, I think this is another one where you're saying you just have to have a conversation with your insurance company or your benefit administrator. I think this is really important because if you go off of it and you haven't had this conversation, it's pretty much almost impossible to get back on it. So I think this is another one where you just have to have a conversation and just really look into it before you make any decisions.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you have a stay-at-home spouse who's younger, and then you switch off of your work plan and switch over to Medicare. What's your younger spouse, stay at home, who's not eligible for that plan, has to find another solution, like the marketplace, the health plan marketplace or such.
Yeah, I had a client who had sort of the reverse situation, I guess, maybe kind of like what you described, where you have a stay-at-home spouse who's younger, and the older spouse extended their work by 2 years to make sure that the younger spouse still had some kind of coverage. So yeah, that's a good one. Let's move on to number 5.
Number 5 is, what if I sign up for Medicare and then get a job that offers health benefits? And I think this is another good question. This brings up the conversation whether you should disenroll from Part B. You also have to consider Social Security as well when it comes to this. So what's kind of your take on this, Erik?
Well, if you're in if you're collecting Social Security, and of course, most of the time we're encouraging our clients to delay at some level. Rarely am I encouraging a married couple to have both start claiming at 62 or 65. There are some instances where there are certainly exceptions to that. But if for whatever reason you're taking Social Security, you're going to be you're going to be covered under Part A, and you have to be enrolled in it. And since it doesn't cost you anything, what's the downside? So there isn't. But in terms of this, you have the option. If you have a good plan under an employer and you're 65 and you're still going strong, you can keep using that employer plan. That's fine. Again, subject to that 20 covered persons limit. Roshan?
Yeah. Well, I think this question it takes us back to the previous one, which was question 3. What if I'm still working? Well, you weren't working, and then now you are, so you fall into that "are you still working" category. And if your plan is eligible, then you can elect not to have Part B. But as you said, Part A is free.
Excellent. So question number 6, this is a little bit more of a complicated one, but it's got a short answer. I retired at age 60 and went onto my former employer's retiree plan. Do I have to enroll in Medicare at age 65? What do you think, Roshan?
Well, yeah, the answer is yes here. This is the one I've gotten some questions on. So, Jim, if you're listening, this is the question you would ask us. So we've got that answer for you.
Shout out to Jim.
Which is yes. Yeah. So since there are no last names stated, he actually, not only does he have his employer plan, he is a veteran, so he's got TRICARE. So his question was, well, I've got these 2 plans. Do I need to enroll in Part B because my premiums will go up? And unfortunately, the answer for Jim and for others that are in similar situations is yes, you've got to enroll for Part A and Part B, or the Medicare Advantage plan, as Erik has mentioned, the old plan versus the newer plan. So Jim and everyone else, if you got a plan through your employer, yes, you still got to enroll.
Awesome. Erik, do you want to add anything to what Roshan said?
No, I think Roshan masterfully answered that one.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll send question number 7 your way. Erik, I know that you're going to have a solid take on this. This is, if I retired and went on to COBRA, can I wait until COBRA expires before enrolling in Medicare?
So I'll be honest with you. This was one that is a little tricky, and my understanding around this is still kind of coming together on this one. So just let's clarify, first of all, what COBRA is. So COBRA is this act that allows people to have portability of their employer-based health plan even after they've retired or left that company, or they've been fired. But for 18 months, you can keep that health coverage going, and that's useful a lot of times in life, not just as you're approaching retirement. There's a period where maybe you're moving into a self-employment phase, and you still want that coverage until you've got the business going, your new gig going strong enough to cover healthcare premiums or what have you. So, but the issue is when it interfaces with age 65 and moving into Medicare, is let's say that you retired at 62, precisely 62. Well, it's going to carry you through to 63 and a half. Then what are you going to do once it's done and you're waiting until 65? You'll have to go on to one of the exchanges and get one of those, or go without coverage or something of that kind. But what if instead it, over that 18 month period, overlaps with when you turn 65? And maybe it overlaps by, maybe you'd retire at 64, you put that COBRA together for 18 months or what have you. Now you're 6 months past age 65, and you're 18 months past when you actually retired. So you've lost access to both the special enrollment period, which was, in the months surrounding your retirement, and you've missed the age 65 enrollment period, which is 3 months on either side. So now you have to wait until the next open enrollment period before you can actually switch over. And there can be a delay in that. So you have now two problems. You enrolled late, that might incur some penalties for you, and you might have a gap in coverage, bad decision. So my point is that if you're going to do that, don't just naively assume that you can stick with the 18-month COBRA and then automatically switch over to Medicare. You want to get on Medicare in that window around turning age 65. If that sort of scenario that I just described applies to you, don't ride the COBRA coverage all the way out to the finish line.
Awesome. That's some really great insight. What do you think, Roshan?
Yeah, well said, Eric. I think something that helped made this a little clearer for me, which might help you or our listeners, is that the ending of COBRA does not create a special enrollment period. Your retiring does. So the fact that COBRA lasts 18 months and you would think, well, I've got coverage till 18 months. Yes, you do, but the end of that coverage doesn't create a special enrollment period, which is why you've got to make sure you make your Medicare decisions earlier.
Awesome. Great points by both of you. The next one, question number 8, is how much does Medicare cost? And my kind of answer to this, it really kind of depends on, your kind of situation, but I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, like the overall cost. I know this is a big factor when people are looking into Medicare, and it's a really common question. They want to know, am I going to be paying more out of pocket, or is everything going to be free, being covered by the government? I think this is going to be a really interesting area for our listeners.
Roshan?
Well, as we've said a few times, Medicare Part A is free. And that's for the hospitalization, and then Medicare Part B, which are for diagnostic tests, regular doctor visits, for things like that. The typical monthly premium right now for 2021 is $148.50 per month. Now it can vary by income, but that's the typical cost. As your income goes up, it can go up, and if your income's a little lower, it can go down.
Yeah. So let's just detail the composition. So Part A free, Part B, just what Roshan just said. Part D is a drug plan. And then if you get, and we think if you use original Medicare, you should, if you augment Part A, Part B, and the drug plan Part D with what's known as a Medicare supplemental plan, insurance plan, from a private party, private insurance company, or sometimes it goes by the nickname the Medigap plan. That's going to cost something too. How much will depend on which of the Medigap plans you choose, which company you choose, and how old you are, what your health circumstances are, etc. Now, the Medigap plans, they are denominated by letters. So A, B, C, D, F, G, K, L, M, N. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in just a sec. But the depending on what the structure of those benefits are will dictate in part what the cost of those are. So, guys, I don't know about you, but when clients are asking me, well, what should I assume about medical out-of-pocket costs during my retirement years? Of course, Part A is free, but I'm usually tallying up what I anticipate will be the Part B, Part D, and Medigap supplement costs, plus possibly some copays, plus possibly some deductibles. I get to a number now, at least on a national average, close to $500 per month per person. How about you?
Yep, similar numbers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
I also, just as an aside, they couldn't come up with anything but using letters again. I think we talked about this last year when we discussed Medicare, but you couldn't have just gone with numbers on one and letters on the other.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, so anyway, I think that's the answer. You want to push forward here, Adrian?
Yeah, we can. We kind of answered question number 9 as well, which is how much does Medicare cover? I think what we haven't discussed is what it doesn't cover, and also I think it's not really on this list, but like what about people that travel a lot? Let's just say they're retired and they travel a lot. Does it cover, on a global scale? Does it cover certain areas? I think that's probably a really interesting area that we can share for our listeners.
Yeah, and that's where with the travel answer, that's where these Medigap plans come into play, right? To help cover you if you are abroad. But the other question of what it doesn't cover, uh, I guess there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot: dental, vision, hearing, cosmetic surgery, um, just to name a
Mm-hmm.
few.
Yeah, and what's more, even on the hospital and doctor costs, well, especially on the hospitalization costs, which Part A covers hospitalizations, there are limitations on that as well. There's only so many, you only get so many days. And there are deductibles that are associated with that. And those deductibles can add up. I mean, so if you're in the hospital, let's say for 120 days, you could have, barring a Medigap policy to pick up some of the slack, you could have some the co-pays that are associated with those and the deductibles and so forth can really amount to a pretty significant bill. So having some of the supplemental plan really alleviates a lot of that burden.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good point, Erik. And now we can move on to the last one, question 10. This is going to be a pretty short one. Does Medicare cover long-term care? And the simple answer is no. Do you guys want to touch on any aspect of that, or should we just move on to our other content?
Yes. Since we're big on long-term care, Roshan, how would you advise people on this one?
Well, I mean, this is the most frequently asked questions. I think I'm not sure why, but um, maybe it's because people think that Medicare will cover all their health needs after. But that's one that I think is commonly misunderstood, where people think that is covered. But as Adrian said, with the simple one-word answer, no, it does not cover long-term care. You can get 100 days covered. So oftentimes when we're looking at policies, we'll look at a waiting period. Waiting period being the policy's not going to pay anything until that time frame has expired. But we'll often look at waiting periods of 100 days to line up with this. But very good question and a popular one. The short answer being you can't expect Medicare to cover your long-term care.
And by the way, so Medicare will cover 100 days of skilled nursing care, and that's if and only if it's prescribed by your doctor and you go straight from the hospital to the skilled nursing facility. So it's it's a very specialized circumstance in which it will cover. So the rule of thumb is like you said, the answer is no.
No. Yep.
Yeah, that's really great point. And if you have like more like questions regarding what we just went through, we're more than happy to have a conversation with you. Or you could look at Medicare.gov as well. They have a really great website to kind of help you go through we kind of call it alphabet soup of different type of options that they have. I know it can get really complex. So it's those are some reference tools for you. And Erik will probably provide some as we go more into this episode.
Yeah, in fact, credit where credit's due. We're going to have a couple of resources on in the show notes, and I really strongly encourage you, if this is of interest to you, please go to our webpage. That's retirementlifestyleshow.com, and go to retirementlifestyleshow.com, find this episode, go to the show notes, and then you'll be able to download a couple of resources that we'll have for you. And so on these 10 questions, all credit goes to Elaine Floyd with Horse's Mouth for her doing that research and keeping those facts and figures updated. And the second resource that we're going to give you is a quick reference guide. It's a 2-pager. It's just tables and tables of information. It'll be a fantastic resource for you. And whether this is you or your parents or somebody that do them a favor, download this and get this into the hands of your friends. And it will answer a lot of the nitty-gritty detailed questions that we just can't really dive into in quite with the same precision here. But go to the show notes is the bottom line. Get these resources. So, guys, there's a few things actually on that quick reference guide that I think are worth our highlighting. So one of them is just the distinction between Medicare Advantage and Original Medicare. We've touched on that a little bit Roshan, you want to kind of describe what that distinction is?
Well, the traditional one is when you've got Part A for the hospitalization, then you've got Part B that will cover the regular doctor's visits. Part D, that'll be the prescription plan. The Medicare Advantage is like the network or the HMO version, where you've got a lot of those, at least A and B together in there. Now you're now restricted to their network, and we can still get D, the prescription drug plans then.
And so it's often called Part C. It's just sort of a nickname because the Medicare Advantage then just goes in and saves. You don't have the Medigap policy that you have to purchase. It's part of this overall framework. And if you like an HMO or a PPO, and many people do, many people don't, but if you do, this can be a great solution. I mean, it simplifies a lot of the paperwork. It's a one-stop shop and that sort of thing. So the problem for a lot of people, especially when they hit early retirement, is that they're thinking, you know what, we're planning on traveling. And it's a little tough to do that if you're restricted to in-network providers. So you went from, let's say, I got to remember the DMV. You went from the DMV area. So listeners who are not part of the DMV area, that's DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I learned from my two friends here. And but anyway, if you travel down to, let's say, Florida or Southern California. Well, if the network you're part of doesn't cover it, you don't, you're going to not be able to do that without having to go through some hoops to get approved for certain kinds of care. Whereas with original Medicare, travelers, hey, you're in good shape, at least if it's domestic. So that's another distinction. Any other distinctions you think are important about that?
Well, in general, Medicare Advantage is supposed to be slightly cheaper, although I have not run quotes on it myself, so I can't give you the difference.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. Particularly, that leads us then back to the issue in original Medicare. Remember, that's A for free, B you pay for, D the drug plan you pay for, and now you have a Medigap plan. As you pointed out, Roshan, they're all these crazy alphabet soup of letters. You have to kind of find which of those plans is going to be the best match for you. Some people are going to want what I'll call the kind of Cadillac plan, where there's no deductibles really beyond the Part B deductible. There's it's just pretty straightforward, and it's a defined thing. Well, the premiums are going to be higher, but it's the Cadillac version. Whereas you can choose some of the other versions, particularly if you think you're going to be using care less often. You just, let's say, pretty healthy, or you're not inclined to get to the doctor that often. Not that we encourage you to see your doctor, but you're not inclined to do that. You might want to pick one of the other plans and save some cash on the outlays for that Medigap plan. I'll tell you, guys, I have some favorites. You want to talk about? Do you have a sort of do you lean this way or that way on any of the letters in this mix?
No, I actually wanted to go through your favorites and ask you why you picked them. So you had mentioned were there three that you really liked?
Yeah, I like G, which for those people that like the Cadillac plan. If you're healthy, pretty healthy, and you're not going to be seeing the doctor a lot, probably, or as much as you might in an unhealthier phase of your life, then I like there's another sort of twist on G, which is the high deductible version. The high deductible version, yeah, I think it's $2,370 in the current calendar year. That's the out-of-pocket deductible on your visits and copays and such. But the plan costs for the G high deductible, you're still getting Cadillac care, and with the exception of that deductible, but you might save a bundle. So let's say that your premium difference between G and G high deductible would be $250 a month. Okay, well, you're saving $3,000 a month. $3,000 a month, you'd be better off just accepting the deductible of $2,370 and save the $3,000. Now you're $630 better off that year. So I think that's a plan. Other people might say, hey, I'm really a low utilizer of this stuff. You might look at K. It covers way less, but it's really cheap. And another one is N, which has more copays, more deductibles, but it's also cheap. But I probably, just speaking for myself, I would probably say if you just start with the G and the G high deductible and maybe N, I think you're at a pretty good place. The K doesn't cover foreign travel. The G and the N do cover 80% of foreign travel. So that's pretty awesome too.
Yeah, that's definitely when you talked about earlier people that are travelers in retirement. That's an important one to
Mm-hmm.
look at. That's how I typically look at it is if people say they are traveling abroad, that all of a sudden eliminates a lot of the plans and you're down to 6. And if people say they are, that's if you are. If you aren't, well, then you look at the um, other 4 plans, and that's sort of the starting point to narrow
Mm-hmm.
things
Mm-hmm.
down. But the other thing you mentioned a couple times that's also a useful data point to narrow things down are, well, how much do you typically utilize? How often are you at the doctor's? What's your healthcare situation like? And then you can make the assessment as to which coverage you can get. And you're only locked in a year at a
Mm-hmm.
time, so you can always change it
Mm-hmm.
next
Yeah, and
year.
it really shows that you for all this, you really just can't use cost as the main driver. I think you really have to look at your overall situation. Do you go to the doctors a lot in a month? Do you travel? Like what doctors will be accepting it or not accepting it? Just there's so many factors where you really can't just boil it down to the cost or how much you're paying. That it definitely is a big thing to consider, but there are a lot of different elements that go into this, and that's why we have all these like sources and we're having these like conversations just to really kind of help you narrow down all these different options that you have out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I would, guys, I'm chomping at the bit to talk about this little known Medicare Advantage piece again. Can I go there, or do you want to say a few other things about this other stuff?
No, please, let's move
Okay,
on.
so folks, we've talked about this as though there's these 2 categories, Medicare, or the original Medicare and Medicare Advantage. And I just want to call your attention to this one that almost nobody knows about. I show this to my clients who are approaching this all the time, and they're going, "What? We've never heard of that." I know. I think no one's heard of it. So it is technically considered a Medicare Advantage plan. So when you go to the Medicare.gov website and you're looking at comparing plans, if you say, "I've ruled out those Medicare Advantage plans because they're HMOs and I don't want an HMO, blah, blah, blah," you've missed out. Go to the Medicare Advantage thing, at least look this over. So this is what this is known is a Medicare medical savings account plan. And so far, it's not offered in every state. It's offered in 34 states and the District of Columbia. So coming back to DMV, it's just DM, no V.
Yes.
And
Yep.
in here in Michigan, no Michigan, but where a lot of my clients are in Illinois, it's there. Texas, it's there. California, it's not. New York, it's not. So you have to kind of piece this out. So it's this. Not all of our listeners are going to have the advantage of this, but many of you are. And so here's why I'm calling this to your attention. So in this particular case, it could be that you never have any out-of-pocket costs for any medical coverage except for the Part B premium, which we talked about. For many people, that'll be $148.50 a month right now and growing from there. The Part D drug plan, those 2 things. But other than that, in terms of net cost to you, it could be that you don't have any costs. How can this be? Well, here's what happens is that you have this thing called a medical savings account. Don't confuse this with a health savings account. At HSA, you can contribute to, your employer may can contribute to. In the case of the MSA, you can't contribute to it. Only the insurer contributes to it. And so far, to the best of my knowledge, there's only one insurer who's even offering this yet. I think that's why it's kind of gradually rolling out in these states, and that's Lasso, LASSO Healthcare. By the way, we have no relationship with Lasso Healthcare. There's nothing here where we have any sort of vested interest in talking about this. It's just, I think, a really cool solution. So what they'll do is there's 2 options. I'm going to talk about this just to explain the concept. There's the first option, and then we'll just make the extension of the second option in just a second. But it works like this. They put $2,000 into your account each year. And they do so, it's not treated as income to you, so it goes straight into your MSA, and it sits in there, and if it's growing with interest or what have you, You're not getting charged on that interest. And if you use it for healthcare expenses, in other words, you write checks out of it to cover the costs of your healthcare, it's also not a taxable distribution to you. So it's triple tax free in the same sense that at least there an HSA is. But here's the thing: if you use less than the $2,000 a year of costs in whatever sort of services you're pursuing, then you keep the remainder in that account, and it's just waiting there for the following year. And each year they keep chunking $2,000 more in. Let's say that I do that 3 years in a row, and I got $2,000 coming in those 3 years in a row. In other words, $6,000, and each year I only spent $1,000. At the end of that 3 years, how much do I have in the accounts left over? I still have $3,000. Year 4 rolls around. They put another $2,000 in. Now there's a $5,000 balance in there, and I get hit with, let's say, a $100,000 event. Your deductible under this plan in this option 1 is a $5,000 deductible. But guess what? You have $5,000 in the account, $3,000 left over from the previous years, $2,000 from this year. Boom! All of that $5,000, you just stroke a check for that out of your MSA. And the other $95,000 of that health event is covered by the plan. So over that 4-year cycle, you had 0 net costs to you. Now, it may not work out as nicely and neatly for you as the sort of the 4-year example that I gave you. And you kind of have to look at your own health circumstances and ask, what do you think are probably the likelihoods of things for you? But you could do that one. They have a second version I mentioned. It just works in exactly the same way, except they put it not $2,000 in each year. They put $3,000 in each year. But in that year in which you get clobbered by some big cost, the deductible is an $8,000 deductible. But I look at it like this: if you're over in one of the original Medicare solutions and you're paying $250 a month in premiums for your Medigap plan, you're already paying, just on that level alone, you're paying $3,000 a year. So you could have this plan, have them put $2,000 in, every single year get slammed with a $5,000 deductible. Guess what? You put $3,000 out of pocket, no different than if you had used that original Medicare plan with a $250 monthly premium charge for it. I just think it just makes so much sense for so many people. I just urge you to look at it. Right there, we probably save people tens of thousands of dollars over their lifetimes. I think our listeners should pay us a fee for that. That's what I'm thinking right now. They should cut us a check. I'm teasing listeners. I'm teasing, just messing with you. But guys, what do you think about that option?
I love it. I wish it was available in Virginia, since I have more clients in Virginia than DC and Maryland. But I will definitely be talking to other clients about this.
Well, the good news is they keep...
The tax benefit is incredible too, like you mentioned. That's just also a great feature about it.
So the good news is that they keep rolling that plan out to more and more states. So I don't know that... I don't know what the 2022 states that'll be added to the list will be, but they've been adding, I'd say 5 or 6 states each year. So there's just the fact that it doesn't cover you in 2021 doesn't mean it won't in 2022 or 2023. Look for it.
Yeah, I think that is a great tip that is worth for everyone to look into and consider it. And I'm thinking about my buddy Jim and his problem earlier. Now he's in Virginia, so unfortunately that's not gonna help him now. But in the future, if it is expanded, that would be a great option for him.
Yeah, and one more thing in terms of traveling, we said earlier that one of the weaknesses of the conventional approach to Medicare Advantage with the HMO or the PPO is that you have to go in network. That's not true with this MSA. So any doctor that'll accept Medicare, just as is true with original Medicare, you can have that doctor provide that service for you. Again, you write the check out of your MSA. If you're going over in the first year, I guess you might be a little out of luck there again. But nonetheless, it doesn't suffer from the same travel restriction that people oftentimes imagine that Medicare Advantage plans do. Okay, guys, I'm done, man. I'm out of ideas here. I think we've helped listeners. I hope we have.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I think this is definitely a great one worth worth ending on. Adrian, I should say, thank you for driving us through. We were worried with all this content we would take too long, so I'm glad we were able to get through it in a timely manner. Erik, great information. I especially love that MSA plan. So I think a lot of listeners will benefit from it.
Roshan, before you wrap it up real quickly, what are all the little ones going to be for Halloween this year?
What are they going to be? My son is a scary clown. My daughter is a fox. And my youngest son is going to be Blippi, who you two, I hope, haven't heard of, because it'd be strange if you were watching this.
Okay.
It's a show for, I would say, 3 and 4 year olds, where this is the part I find a little strange. He has built an empire with this, but it's probably a 40-year-old guy dresses up in a blue shirt with orange suspenders and an orange bow tie, and he talks in a high-pitched voice, and he goes to places. He actually does teach some stuff, so I see value in that part of what he does, but it does also seem a little strange to me with a grown man dressing and talking in a high-pitched voice. So.
That is interesting. I haven't heard of him, so I guess that's good for me, right, Roshan?
Yeah. Yeah, when it's your turn to deal with these kids shows, there'll probably be something else that parents think's a little strange. Like, I remember Barney got the same thought or treatment, and for my niece and nephew, there was the Wiggles, which also seemed a little strange. But I guess if you dress up and use a high pitched voice, the little kids love it.
I guess so.
Yeah, there you go. Erik,
we're just trying to grow the audience here.
How about are either of you dressing up for Halloween?
Well, we're dressing up the puppy as a pumpkin. So Alfred's going to be a pumpkin this year. So we're excited for that. What about you, Erik? Any
I haven't
cool
thought
family
about that at all. Honestly,
any of your family members, the little ones on your end, dressing up as anything, or
they're
doing anything
2,500 miles away, so I haven't really pursued that question with them. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm sure they're dressing up. We just don't know what it is,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Guys, that was a good episode. Thanks for asking. Adrian, we'll call that your segment for getting to know the host, Halloween costumes.
Yeah.
This time, as opposed to a top 10 list.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to all the listeners, as we say, please let us know if you have questions. Jim, that was a good one. Anyone else that has questions, let us know. Like, subscribe, tell your friends and family, give us 5 stars, and please check out the website. It's got a lot of valuable information. As Erik mentioned earlier, the show notes and the available pieces to download at retirementlifestyleshow.com. And we'll be back to you next week with an information-packed episode. This has been the Retirement Lifestyle Show.